Alright, so this next deck is the Wildwood Tarot, and this tarot deck, it's not done by the same people, but for some reason this deck and the Druidcraft Tarot, like, for some reason go hand in hand. Like, for me, like, they just remind me of each other, even though they're actually kind of different. This deck, it was really interesting. I was drawn to this deck and the Druidcraft Tarot years ago, and for some reason, I decided to get this deck instead of the Druidcraft that day, and it was a huge mistake. Don't get me wrong, this deck is lovely, but the Druidcraft Tarot is one that I absolutely adore, and I didn't end up buying it till much later. I actually waited till I got to Australia to buy it. But this deck I've never really specifically connected with. I have done a few readings with it, and it's fine, but the reason I have a hard time with it is because the meanings in the book are very different. This is not super traditional Rider-Waite, like, system. So I do have a bit of a harder time reading this. I do like this deck. Like, it's beautiful. I'm not a huge fan of the guys in this deck, I'm not gonna lie. But it's almost like a little too earthy for me. Like, the art isn't my favorite. But the few readings I have done with it are very, very cool. Yeah, I'm not super, like, drawn to the whole, like, Viking style looking people, so, like, it's, you know, it's just, it doesn't draw me in quite like other decks. Now, the Druidcraft Tarot does have a similar thing, but it is more witchy and less, like, how would I say, yeah, less Viking-like, so that, I do like that. And actually, the Druidcraft was the first tarot deck I actually was able to read without a book, and so that has a really, really special place in my heart. But this is a really, really cool deck, and I do know a lot of people who like this deck, like, a lot. A lot of my witchy friends really connect with this because it is so earthy. I just don't personally connect with it. The cardstock for it is really lovely, and you can do reversals with the back. And yeah, so it is a really cool deck. It comes with a rather large book, which I hear is, like, really awesome. And a lot of the names have changed. I don't know. It's not a deck that really goes along very well with how I personally read. So that's why I haven't been super, like, drawn to use it a lot. But, like I said, the few readings I've done have been, really interesting, but I just don't feel like I can delve into these cards as well because I just don't connect to them as much. But the art is pretty unique. So the next cards I am showing you are the Beautiful Creatures Tarot by Jasmine Beckett Griffith. Now, there has been a lot of disappointment around this deck, and I'm not gonna lie, this deck was not what I was expecting. Just to kind of show you, this is what the cover looked like. And it's called Beautiful Creatures, and so I was thinking there's gonna be a lot more dragons, and apparently the Beautiful Creatures were the girls, and I was not as pleased by that. Now this deck is very thick, it's very shiny, it's just not a deck I love. I have done 1 or 2 readings, and they actually have been pretty good, and the book is actually very good, but the biggest problem I have with these, and I believe Racine does as well, is none of these pictures were specifically done for the tarot deck. Like, all of these were art she already had, and so a lot of them don't really line up with the meanings. Like, they're not super unique in the sense of, like if she'd actually straight up done pictures for the tarot, I think this deck would have been amazing. But I don't know, like, the pictures just seem like she just threw pictures with, like, the meanings, and then someone wrote a book. Like, that's how this feels. Like, I really don't like 4 of Airs. Like, how does that represent the 4 of Swords? Like, I don't get it. So yeah, the art is beautiful. Like, I do like her art. Like, I did used to like it a lot more. It's not really my style anymore. But I know for people who were huge Jasmine Beckett Griffith, or who are Jasmine Beckett Griffith fans, this deck was a bit of a letdown because, you know, she does a lot of oracle decks, but then they were like, oh my god, she's gonna do a tarot deck, and then it just kind of, like, fell really flat. So this is a deck that I've considered, you know, gifting, but every time I think to gift it, like, before I gift a deck, I always like to do a reading with it just to see if I'm like, oh, do I want this? And I've tried to gift it twice, and every time I decide to keep it, so I'm not really sure what that's about. This is, like, super creepy. Yeah. Anyway, this deck is not my favorite. The end. But if you like her work and you don't need the like the pictures to necessarily really line up with the meanings, then go for it. But I don't really like it. And it's also super thick. Like, it just doesn't feel like an oracle deck, I mean, a tarot deck. And I don't really like the back. Like, this doesn't even look like her work like that very much. Anyway, long story short, not my favorite deck. But yeah, this is the Wild Creatures. Sorry, the Beautiful Creatures Tarot. Alright, so this next deck is the Joie de Vivre Tarot by Paulina Cassidy. So I did show you her the Paulina Tarot. Again, this is not a deck that I've super delved into. I just really was drawn to the art. This deck is a lot more like playful than the Paulina Tarot, and I believe this was the second deck she did. I believe she did the Paulina Tarot first. It's really interesting. Even though the art is really, really similar, the feeling of this deck is just completely different. So yeah, so it's a really cute deck. Like, again, it's not super Rider-Waite based, like the art isn't, but there's so much in each card that you could really like glean a lot of like symbolism. This deck, the pictures are actually a lot more simple than the Paulina Tarot. Like, the Paulina Tarot is almost like, oh my god, it's almost like an overload of like visual stimulation. But this is, the pictures are a little more simple. They actually kind of remind me of more like children book kind of, children's books kind of like art. Let's see if I can get this in focus for you guys. Yeah, so it's a really kind of interesting deck. The characters are like kind of creepy, but also like kind of adorable. So it's really interesting. So yeah, I really haven't delved into this. I feel like this is one of those decks that's more like I just have it in my collection. I probably wouldn't read with it a lot. And you know, if I was really going to pare down my deck, it's probably one of the decks that I would move on, just because I don't read with it very much. But to look at it and to enjoy it, I love that. It is a really unique deck. So this deck also comes along with a little white book. Alright, so this next deck is my current full-time reading deck. I do use a couple other decks pretty frequently, but this currently is my love affair. It's also my most recent tarot deck that I've purchased, and as you can see, it is the Bonfire Tarot, and oh my god, you guys, I can't get enough of this deck. I just, like, I want to do more, like, spreads just because I want to, like, hang out with it more. I am loving this deck. I wasn't sure about it at first when I first saw it, but when I got it, I'd already started lusting after it, and it does not disappoint. This deck is amazing. Now, obviously, if you don't like this art, you're gonna not like this deck, because it's a very unique deck. It comes with an amazing book. It's just absolutely beautiful. I really enjoy it. The book is actually kind of different. It actually talks more about like her experience with the card and like her reason for doing it the way she did, and then a bit of the meaning. So it's actually kind of more of like a making of kind of book. But this deck is just, oh my god. I don't know what it is. It's not even because the art is like my absolute favorite art or anything. It's just, I mean, I do love it. Like, I love looking at these cards. It's amazing. It's super unique, and I love like the feel of the deck. I love, like, the cardstock's pretty good. The full card's actually not my favorite, ironically. I actually don't usually connect with the full card very much anyway, but this is the deck I am going to. It's the deck I've been reading with other people. It's the deck that I've been reading for myself. Like, I don't know. These messages are just glorious, and yeah, I don't know. There's just something about this deck that I can't get enough of right now. And yeah, the book is really great. Yeah, I just love it. That's all I can say. And I did just do an unboxing of this deck, so if you'd like to have a full look through, I do go through the entire deck at some point, so you can go back through my videos and find that, because it is my most recent tarot unboxing video. So, love this deck. Alright, so the next deck is the Tarot Nefertari, and I love this deck. I actually do believe it's out of print now, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. I adore this deck because I'm obsessed with Egyptian anything, ancient Egypt of any kind, and it's got this amazing gold foil here. This is actually done by the same people who did the Klimt Tarot, or the Golden Tarot of Klimt, and they have a couple different decks, and I'm just absolutely obsessed. But this comes with a little white book. And I just love this deck. I haven't done a whole lot of readings with this, but it's just gorgeous. This is another one of those decks where, like, even if I didn't read with it, like, I'm so glad I have it. It's like one of my favorite decks. Like I said, I just love the Egyptian style, and I just love looking at this deck. It does have the different languages and stuff like that, and some people don't like that. But yeah, but definitely go and look to see if it's out of print or not, because if it's not, it's definitely a beautiful deck to have. And it is good at readings. I didn't take it with me to Australia, and I kind of regretted that I didn't, because I really would have liked to have, you know, worked with this deck some more, and I'm sure I will in the future. It's just not one I've really delved into specifically. So yes, really lovely. I'm gonna see if I can see. There's some really beautiful. Alright, so this next deck is called the Cat's Eye Tarot, I believe, yeah. And a friend of mine actually got this for me because he knew I was obsessed with cats and saw it and was like, Cats Tarot, she'll like this, and I do. I really delved into this deck more before I left for Australia. It was one of the decks I used a lot, and it's a really lovely deck, and it reads very well. It is rather cheeky. The cardstock is pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of the super glossy, but yeah, it's all good. The deck itself is, you know, very comfortable. I do think it's interesting that the backing is sideways on it, which I think is kind of interesting. But it is a really playful deck. They did a really good job of capturing cat energy, but also then capturing the energy of the tarot. And it is pretty Rider-Waite based. I do have another deck called the Mystical Cat Tarot, which is a little more like if cats had like a like almost like a culture, or they were actually like people. They're not dressed or anything, but they do have more of like that kind of an attitude. Whereas this deck is more about like cats in their actual like normal like habitat. But yeah, they're pretty cheeky, and some of them are a little yeah, like this one. He's like spraying. I think it's more of like the destructive side of cats, if that makes sense. But yeah, the art's really interesting. It's a little abstract, but it's kind of it's a cool deck. And this one also does come with a little white book as well. Alright, so of course we have the Wild Unknown Tarot. Most of you guys probably know what this looks like, so I'm not going to, you know, do a whole lot of this one. But for those of you who are just getting into tarot, this is really an iconic tarot deck. It came out a few years ago, and I believe there's a second edition of it now. The cardstock is brilliant. This is kind of like the deck that most tarot readers will compare other decks to, not because specifically of the art itself. So these are upside down. But because of the quality of the deck. This deck is like top-notch quality. The cardstock is amazing. The box is amazing. And these pictures, even though it's a relatively new deck in the big scheme of like the whole like tarot thing and when the Rider-Waite came out and all that, like these pictures have become iconic representations for the tarot. And for a while on Instagram, you couldn't go on Instagram and, you know, in the tarot section and not see the Wild Unknown. It's just that popular, and people have gotten this as tattoos and all kinds of stuff like that. There is a book that came out that you can buy to go along with this deck. Oh, here we go again. That you can purchase, but what comes with it is just like a little, it's not even a white book, it's like a little like poster card with all the like a sheet with all the meanings on it, just like keywords, which if you know tarot, that's perfectly fine. But if you do want a book, I think it's like another like $15-20 or something for the book, and then I think the deck was like $50. This is a privately produced deck. I think now it is now you can get it in store. Yeah, I do know that you can get it in stores. It used to be you could only get it through their website, but now it's much more mass produced. But as far as I know, the quality is still just as good. So that's what I've heard, or what I've seen. Like the box still seems the same, and it seems like they cared enough about this deck to make sure the quality was good. So I can't imagine if they got it mass produced that they would let that go to the wayside. But this is the Wild Unknown. It's amazing. Yeah. My friend Marielle is starting to get into this, and I have a feeling she's going to like this deck. Let's see, I can just do that. But yeah, has some pretty amazing cards in it. So yeah, that's the Wild Unknown. All right, so this next deck is the Japri Tarot. It's French. That's what Racine calls it. That's what Avalon calls it. And I think that's just because we genuinely don't know how it's pronounced. But it's it looks like this for anyone who actually knows French. That's what it's called. And this was one of the first one of the first few tarot decks that I got when I was starting off. This deck just really caught my eye. It is such a unique, beautiful deck. I did a lot of reading with this in Australia. It actually was one of my main reading decks when I was working in the crystal shop. So this deck really has an amazing space, you know, in my tarot collection. The card stock is amazing. The cards are lovely. You can see how big they are. This deck is just absolutely amazing, and it's extremely abstract. The book I found was really good. It's one of the first books I really delved into. It's actually rather large, and it talks about the paintings, and as you can see, I mean, Rider-Waite isn't even like in this at all, you know. It's a completely abstract, and there's a lot of different types of paintings. You can see how the artist really changed styles as they were working on this deck, but it like oddly works. And so they really put a lot of thought into the deck. It's an amazing deck, but it's definitely, I wouldn't suggest it for someone who's just getting started with tarot. The book is really amazing, so the book is good for getting to know the cards. But this is one of my favorite Eight of Swords cards. It's just not super easy to read like symbolism unless you're completely going intuitively and just going off that, because it's really hard to see how like the meanings and the cards really do match up, because there is such a abstract, you know, look to these cards. I hope these are clear, you guys. But I absolutely adore this deck. There's like half the paintings in here I would put on my wall. Like they're just absolutely gorgeous. Alright, the next deck is the Mystical Cat Tarot, and this is the other cat deck that I own. I really like this deck as well. Both the cat decks really read very nicely, and if you like cats, they're definitely worth getting. They're not my favorite decks in the sense of I don't use them all the time, but because I am so connected to cat energy, I will definitely pick them up and just tap into that energy just for that alone. I just think it's so funny that cats really do have their own tarot decks. Like there's a serious cat obsession that people have. But as you can see, they're a little more like, there's like a personality to them. There's a little bit more of a mystical, it's the Mystical Cat Tarot, aspect to them. Like there's more like almost human personality. to this deck. As you can see, this, or yeah, you can see like this. Like there, you can see it is borderless, and this does come with a rather large book, which I actually haven't looked into all that much. I would say the meanings of these cards are pretty Rider-Waite based, so it's pretty easy to read even without, without the book. But what I have read of the book is it's very thorough and it's really nice. So the cardstock is it's all right. It's not bad, and the size is really nice. I really like that one. See, it's like bubbles. Yeah, so what I do like about this deck is it looks like the cats are kind of like doing human things, but it also looks like humans could be around and the cats are just kind of like sitting where a human would sit, or like with the magician, like it's just playing with the book. But you could also interpret it as it's actually, you know, being the magician. So you can kind of go both ways, which is kind of cool.